Hi, it's Paul here from selfhelpforlife.com, and in today's video I'm going to talk about how to control and change your emotions. So this is how most people think emotions work. Something happens and you feel something, either good or bad. So here's some examples. You get a great new job and you feel excited and you can't wait to start. Someone praises you about some work you've done well and that makes you feel worthy, it makes you feel good. It's the run up to your holiday and you're feeling excited and looking forward to the holiday. You get a kind gesture from your partner or a friend and that makes you feel good too. Or it could be simply a sunny day and that makes you smile. And it works in the other way as well. So you've got a difficult boss that's criticizing what you're doing and that makes you feel not worthy enough, not good enough, or frustrated in some way. You've reached the end of your holiday and you're feeling a little down. Or someone says something to you and that makes you feel angry or grumpy. Or maybe you've got no money, so that makes you feel maybe frustrated or sad. Or some kind of physical illness or pain that makes you feel a certain way as well. Or it could be just a rainy or a cloudy day that just makes you feel a bit down. So what's the problem with this way of thinking about it? The problem with this is that your emotional state depends on something or someone else. So it's not within your control. And this is a problem because how you act depends a lot or almost entirely on how you feel. So if you feel excited, you feel inspired, you feel happy and you feel confident, then you're much more likely to perform better and you're going to do more. And I'm sure you've seen this in your life. If you feel angry, depressed, sad or frustrated, it's much more likely that you're either going to procrastinate or you're going to sabotage yourself or you're going to say something to someone else that's not going to help you in the long run, something that you're going to regret later. So our ability to act depends on how we feel, and how we feel depends on something or someone else. Okay, so this is how most people think. However, no outside event is completely within your control. We can influence outside events, but we cannot completely control them. However, how you think about the outside event is within your control, and I'm going to come back to that shortly. And I believe that it's the feelings or the emotions that keep you stuck more than the events themselves anyway. So I'm going to give you an example of that. Let's say that you ask your boss for a pay rise, okay? And the fear really comes from not so much the boss saying no, it's the hurt feeling that could come from that. It's the feeling of having a lack of control, a lack of influence, that this is dependent, your livelihood is dependent on someone else, and the emotional pain that comes from that. And that's actually far worse than the words that he or she says. And the same would go for a feeling of rejection if you were asking a man or a woman out on a date. It's not so much what that person says, it's how you feel. So as I mentioned, this is how most people think that emotions are generated. That a situation happens and then you feel good or bad dependent on that situation. So how does it really work? So something happens, we have a situation, then we have a thought about that situation, and that thought is very fast, and that thought generates some meaning about that situation, and that meaning is often dependent on some kind of belief you have, and that belief will be dependent on some kind of past experience quite often. That very fast thought then generates some kind of emotion. And then from that emotion generates some kind of behavior or action. And then from that behavior or action generates some kind of result. That could be a good result or a not so good result. And that then generates a new emotion. Okay, so our feelings or emotions come from our thoughts about situations. But the reason most people don't see it that way is because the thoughts happen so fast and they're very unconscious. Okay, so let me give you an example of how this works. So let's say two people get made redundant from the same company. Person one has this thought, maybe very unconsciously, that I'm never going to get another job. Okay, so feel sad. Might also have other thoughts such as, I've not done an interview for 15 years, so I'm going to be bad at interviews. Or maybe they believe that they're too old. Or maybe they just believe that they can't do anything else, they could never work for another company. So all those kind of thoughts, some of which will be conscious, some of which will be less conscious. I mean, when you think about those thoughts, all those thoughts there, the belief behind that thought is really that I'm not good enough. Okay? So that's going to generate the feelings of sadness, feeling frustrated, maybe feeling angry, feeling resentful. And then the behavior is going to be that that person's either going to do nothing to find a new job, or maybe they're going to try and seek some kind of revenge against that employer that made them redundant. Okay, now person 2 gets made redundant from the same company. And the thoughts and the meaning that that person has is something along the lines of, look, I've got great skills, I did a really good job there, I've got experience, maybe it's time for a change anyway, the boss didn't really respect me, I can get a job with more money, I could even start a business. So behind all those thoughts is basically a fundamental belief that I'm good enough, I can do something with this, I can get a better situation as a result of this. Maybe this redundancy is actually a blessing, it's actually giving me a kick up the backside to actually do something different. So as a result of all those thoughts, that person's going to start to feel maybe confidence, acceptance, excitement. So that person's going to do more, they're going to look for a new job or maybe even start a business. So they're going to feel some positive emotions, the same kind of emotions such as confidence. And so, yeah, they're going to have a much better outcome. Okay, so you can see how this works. It's the meaning, the thoughts about the situation that what's really matters. And it's almost that situation being made redundant has no meaning in itself. You know, it has no meaning. It's you that assigns the meaning. And that applies to any situation. It's you that assigns the meaning. It's just that most people do this unconsciously. They create the meaning without really thinking about it. And also they only assign one meaning. You know, there could be lots of meanings for any situation, but most people just unconsciously just come up with one meaning, and it's quite often negative. So the first step really with any situation is to ask yourself, well, what else could this mean? What else could this mean? And there's a great saying which I really love. I'm not quite sure who said it, but it is, the only meaning this has is the meaning you give it. The only meaning this has is the meaning you give it. So, just to recap here, emotions are not dictated by outside events. They come from your thoughts, i.e. the meaning of those outside events, and that's linked to your beliefs. However, because this happens so quickly, it seems very automatic. So it's almost like the situations act as some kind of trigger to make you feel something good or bad. Okay, and it all happens so quickly that it just seems like it's automatic. But just remember that we generate our feelings and emotions, not other people and other situations. And it's really easy to get this intellectually. I mean, I'm guessing that as you're watching or listening to this now, you're probably saying, yes, Paul, this makes complete sense to me. You know, this is how it works. It just makes sense. However, what will happen is tomorrow you'll go out in the world and somebody will be angry with you. Something that will happen that you're not expecting. And you'll feel a certain way, maybe some kind of negative feeling. And it will all happen so fast that it seems like the old way of thinking about it, that the situation generates the emotion, seems real for you. So what I'm going to help you do in this video is get some experience of the way that it works and give you some ways to help break that automatic trigger and make it change over time. And as I mentioned, this is quite unconscious, so it might take a little bit of work to do this, but I'm going to give you some great ways to help you right now. So how do you gain control over your emotions? Well, the first thing is awareness. Remind yourself regularly that I am in control of how I feel. Remind yourself that when something happens, a situation, that I'm going to have a thought that's going to happen very fast and possibly be unconscious, that's going to generate some kind of emotional feeling that will then result in a behavior, doing something or not doing something, that will give me a result and then a new emotion. So once you start to get this more in your mind and you start to remember this, then what will happen is the next time you feel bad, you'll start to remember that you actually have two options. You have option one, which is to keep doing what you've always done and what everybody else does. And if you keep doing that, you're going to continue to feel bad. Or secondly, become wise. Ask yourself, if I think new positive thoughts about this particular experience, then that's going to make me feel better, that's going to make me act more positively, and I'm going to have a different result. Okay, and if I do this often enough, I'm going to have more positive situations and I'm going to have a better life. Now, it's easiest to do this if you notice the emotion early on, okay? Because once you get really into a negative emotional state, things actually change, your blood flow actually changes in your brain, and it moves away from the reasoning center more into the amygdala, which is the emotional brain, okay? And then it gets harder to think of these ideas at that time. So look, if that happens, don't beat yourself up. Just wait till the emotions die down and then start to ask yourself, how else could I look at this? What positive thoughts and meaning could I give this? And do this even if the negative emotion seems very natural and normal, even if you've experienced it many, many times before. So I suppose what I'm saying here with this awareness step is really to take 100% responsibility for your emotions, the good and the bad ones. Okay, and by taking responsibility, I'm not saying you necessarily have to change them all straight away, but it's just being aware that you control your emotions, and that over time you can start to change those and experience the negative ones less and less. Okay, so the second way is to know when it's okay to feel bad. Okay, so major life events do require some kind of adjustment and have a grieving process. So examples could be, death of a loved one or a family member, a relationship breakup, redundancy, or a major health challenge or scare. I'm sure there's others as well, but they're the main ones that I can think of. And in these situations, just acknowledge there is a grieving process, there is an adjustment process, and what you can do as part of the grieving process is take the time to really express these emotions. And you might need the help of a good friend or family member, or maybe a therapist to do this. And also use this as an opportunity to take stock of your life and perhaps make some changes. It's interesting how often the best decisions come in the darkest of times. And the goal really of the grieving process is to achieve something called acceptance. So basically when it's not holding you so strongly emotionally, but you feel a kind of sense of acceptance and that you're ready to move on. Okay, the third way of dealing with this is to release the emotions. Okay, now I've talked about this in videos before. Basically with emotions we have three options. We can hold them in, which is known as suppressing them. Okay, we can express them or release them. Okay, so suppressing them is not great. It's not good for your body because you're holding them inside. And what happens then is that you become, when other situations happen, you act more emotionally than maybe you need to, okay, because you're holding them inside. Expressing them is good for you, okay, but it's not always so good for the person you're expressing them to. So if it's your partner or a good friend and you're regularly expressing your emotions, your negative emotions, then it's quite hard for them, which is why sometimes using a therapist is great in that kind of situation. But there is a middle ground, and this is a way that a lot of people don't think about, which is releasing the emotions, okay? And my favorite method of doing this is called the Sedona method, and I'll put a link in the description to a video I've done on the Sedona method questions, so you can use that to release emotions. Other methods that are great are hypnotherapy, so going and seeing a hypnotherapist. They have a lot of processes that they can use to help you release emotions. And EFT, the emotional freedom technique, is another great way to release emotions. Okay, the next one is a little ritual you can do for 7 days, and it helps you become more aware of your thoughts. So what you do is for the next 7 days, you become very, very aware of your negative emotions, okay? And whenever you experience one, you stop and notice what it is, and then note down any thoughts that you're thinking as you're experiencing that emotion. So you can ask yourself the question as you experience that emotion, what kind of thoughts am I thinking right now? Okay. Now the goal of this exercise is not to stop the negative emotions. It's just to notice the thoughts and write them down. and you'll catch a few of those thoughts. You won't catch all of them, but you'll catch a few, okay? And from those thoughts, you can start to work out the meaning behind those emotions, okay? And once you've done that for 7 days, you can then move on to the next way, which is to start changing the meaning, okay? So changing the meaning of these thoughts by asking yourself questions. So the kind of questions you can ask is, what's good about this? Or what else could this mean? And what you want to do here is force yourself to find the good in whatever the situation is that's making you feel bad. And you know, when you look at that redundancy example again, that first person who immediately felt bad and felt that he didn't have any options, that he'd never find another job, if he'd asked the question, you know, what else could this mean, or what other meanings could this have, then he would have started to have more choices, more possibilities, okay? The next one is to change your focus. This is a little bit similar to changing the meaning, but it's more about your consistent thoughts and what you're imagining about the situation. Okay, so again, going back to the redundancy example, if you're imagining in your mind that you're going to do badly at interviews or that there's nothing out there, those kind of things, then if that's what you're consistently imagining, then you're going to continue to get those kind of feelings. Okay, so it's just changing the self-talk that's around that situation, but also what you're imagining in your mind as well. And again, the more you can focus on the good, what you can appreciate, what you can learn from that experience, because there's always a learning, there's always a reason behind that experience. Okay, the next one is changing your physiology. Okay, so emotions are very associated to your body. Okay, so if you're feeling a negative emotion of some kind, it's quite likely that your head will be down, okay, your shoulders will be forward, you won't be smiling, and often I find, and I think a lot of people find as well, breathing is very light, okay, and your voice tends to be very quiet as well, okay. So next time you're feeling down or feeling bad, then we can use your body to change that feeling or that emotion. So let's say some kind of positive emotion, you would normally feel the opposite. So you'd be maybe using your hands, gesturing a lot. You would have your head up, you'd be smiling, you'd be breathing deeply, okay? You'd be speaking clearly, maybe louder as well. So what you can do is, when you're feeling down, you can just do the opposite with your body. And so try this right now. Let's say to feel confident, you're going to be smiling, your head's going to be up, you're going to be breathing slowly and deeply, your shoulders are going to be back. Okay, so just do that now and just notice how your emotions change. So that's a really easy thing to do. Okay, it's almost like it's much easier to act and the thinking will follow than to think and then the actions will follow. Okay, so the next one is language. What we say to ourselves and what we say to other people has a large effect on our emotions as well. So banish the word I can't and speak in positive ways about yourself to others. Because if you say something like, I'm not good at interviews or I'm not very confident, then your unconscious mind hears that. It's like an affirmation. Even though you're saying it to someone else, your mind thinks you're saying that to yourself. Okay, so that's important too. And say the opposite. So when you hear something like that, like, you know, I'll never get a new job, then say the opposite, which is I can get a new job. Something like that. Okay, the next one is affirmations. So this links again to using language. So some nice affirmations to help you manage your emotional states are, I can change how I feel right now. So I can change how I feel right now. Or I am in charge of how I feel. I am in charge of how I feel. So these are some of my ways to help you take charge of your emotional state and begin to feel more positive emotions over time. Now, as I mentioned, those thoughts behind the situations are often very unconscious and very fast. So it will take time to start to generate these new patterns. Okay, so consistency is important. Just working through this and you'll start to notice differences as well. And one of the best ways to be consistent is to have some kind of morning ritual. So something that you do every day that's reprogramming your mind for success. working with affirmations and things like that, and just having a way every day of just reminding yourself of all these kind of things. So one of the programs I recommend for creating an empowering morning ritual is called Morning Ritual Mastery. It's a program that I've used a number of times now to create morning rituals in my life, which I highly recommend. If you want to go and check out that program, the link is selfhelpforlife.com/morning ritual mastery. So that's selfhelpforlife.com/morning ritual mastery. So I hope you found this video useful. As always, please do like the video, give it a thumbs up. Please subscribe if you haven't already and click the bell notification. That way you'll always be updated whenever I release new videos. If you haven't already, do check out my website. That is selfhelpforlife.com. On my website, you will see the written versions of most of these videos, also a link to my podcast and social media as well. So I hope you enjoyed this video. Look forward to talking with you again and sharing more great information with you very soon. Bye for now.